More than 2,000 farmers never walked away from their Ford 8N. It was supposed to be the people's tractor. Simple, affordable, unstoppable. Instead, it became a death trap. And shockingly, it wasn't even the deadliest tractor ever built. Here are the 10 deadliest tractors ever built. Number 10. International Harvester Farmall Super A. The Super A looked perfect for small farms. Compact, cheap, and simple enough that anyone could fix it. Dealers sold them fast in the late 40s. Weekend farmers loved them, and first-time tractor buyers trusted the International name. It handled row crops better than anything else in its price range. The narrow front end slipped between corn rows without damage. Touch control hydraulics let you adjust implements without stopping. International called it the little tractor that works like a big one. But here's where it gets ugly. The steering box bolts directly to the front axle. No shock absorption, no protection. Hit a rock hard or drop into a deep furrow, and the impact goes straight up the steering shaft into your arms. Broken wrists were common, and dislocated shoulders happened weekly. Yet, that's not what killed farmers. The seat bolts work loose. After 200 hours, the vibration shakes them free. Not gradually where you'd notice, suddenly. 1 minute you're driving, the next you're falling backward off a moving tractor. No rollover protection and definitely no seatbelt. Nothing between you and 3,000 pounds of steel. The rear wheels keep turning, the PTO keeps spinning, and you're on the ground behind them. 17 farmers died in Wisconsin alone when their seats came loose. Repair shops started keeping extra seat bolts in stock. Dealers knew about the problem by 1951, but they kept selling them anyway. Internationals used cheap bolts where they needed good ones. Saved maybe 50 cents per tractor, but cost dozens of lives. Number 9. John Deere 4020. Every farm kid learned to drive on a 4020. If you worked on a farm in the 60s, you drove one. They're still everywhere. Auction lots, estate sales, working farms. John Deere built them from 1964 to 1972. 6-cylinder diesel, power steering, live PTO. Everything farmers wanted in a modern tractor. The 4020 meant you'd made it and were successful enough to buy the best. Farmers passed them down through generations. Grandfathers trusted them with grandkids. The 4020 was more than equipment, it was family tradition. What most people don't know is, the hydraulic hoses can't handle the pressure. The hydraulic system runs at 2,500 psi with rubber hoses rated for only 2,000 psi maximum working pressure. When they blow, and they always blow eventually, that fluid doesn't just leak. It becomes a high-pressure injection weapon capable of cutting through skin, muscle, and bone. One mechanic in Iowa checked a loose fitting. Hydraulic fluid shot into his palm through what looked like a pinhole. 3 days later, they cut his hand off. The fluid had killed everything it touched inside his arm. Add in a PTO shaft that spins at 540 RPM with guards that fall off after the first season, and you've got a machine that killed more farmers than any other John Deere mode. Clothing, gloves, loose sleeves, anything that caught the spinning shaft got wound up instantly. No time to react, no emergency stop, just 540 revolutions per minute of unstoppable force. OSHA counted 847 injuries from 4020s between 1965 and 1975. Most were hydraulic injections or PTO entanglements. John Deere's fix was better warning stickers. Massey Ferguson 135. The MF 135 was the small farm favorite through the 70s. British engineering, reasonable price, and parts everywhere. It looked like a car compared to American tractors. Banks approved loans easily. The Massey Ferguson name meant quality, and insurance was cheap because it looked safe. Small farmers bought them as their main tractor, trusting British engineering to keep them alive. Here's the problem. The wheelbase is 72 inches. That's shorter than most pickup trucks, but it's carrying implements that weigh twice what the tractor does. Physics doesn't care about your budget or your brand loyalty or how good the reputation is. Farmers called it the Widowmaker. It felt safe until it killed you. Steering worked fine. Brakes were good. Everything seemed normal until the moment you realized you were going over. The rollover happened in stages. First is a slight tip that might recover, then the point where it wouldn't, then 4,800 pounds coming down on top of you. Most farmers had half a second to understand they were about to die. One dealer in Kentucky stopped selling them after 3 rollover deaths in 6 months. All experienced farmers, all on slopes they'd worked for years, all dead because physics eventually wins. The family sued, but Massey Ferguson's lawyers pointed to the operator manual. Do not operate on slopes exceeding 10 degrees. If you thought narrow was bad, wait until you see what happens when they go wide. Number 7. Case IH 7250 Magnum. The 7250. Magnum was built for big farms going bigger. 250 horsepower, 18 speeds, enough power to pull anything. This was corporate farming equipment, serious machines for serious operations. Case IH sold them to farmers expanding their operations. More power meant fewer passes. Fewer passes meant lower costs. Lower costs meant higher profits. The math worked on paper. The cab was comfortable. Controls made sense, and visibility was excellent. Everything about the 7250 screamed professional equipment built by people who understood farming. Here's where it gets terrifying. All that power goes through a transmission that explodes under stress. Not slips or stalls. Explodes. The CVT belt system has no relief valve. When something stops the wheels, the energy has to go somewhere. Hit a rock or catch a fence, the transmission housing cracks and metal flies everywhere. Hydraulic fluid sprays at 200 degrees. The noise is loud enough to damage your hearing permanently. But worse is the weight problem. Empty, it's 16,000 pounds sitting mostly over the back wheels, but add a front loader and the rear end lifts like a playground seesaw. No front weight means no steering, braking, or control. Just 20 tons of machinery going wherever gravity wants it to go. And you're along for the ride. Case knew about the transmission problem. They knew about the weight distribution. They issued a recall in 1998 after 23 rollovers killed 11 people. The fix was a software update and a warning sticker. The fundamental problems never changed. They just stopped making them and moved to bigger models with the same issues. Worse, this next one was marketed as the safety tractor. Number 6, Ford 5000. Ford advertised the 5000 as their safety breakthrough. Dual hydraulics, live PTO, optional rollover protection. Every magazine ad emphasized safety first. Dealers pushed them hard starting in 1965. The marketing worked, and farmers bought them believing Ford had solved agriculture safety problems. Banks offered better rates for safety tractors. Insurance companies reduced premiums. Everyone believed Ford's safety story. The 5000 had good power, smooth transmission, and modern features. This was supposed to be farming's safe future. What they didn't advertise is that the brake system splits left and right for steering help. But the linkage is cast iron under constant stress. When it breaks, and cast iron always breaks, both brakes fail at once. No warning and no gradual failure. 1 second you have brakes, the next you don't. Just momentum and gravity controlling where you go. The live PTO never stops spinning. Even with the clutch down, even with the tractor stopped, that shaft turns at 540 RPM. Ford engineers thought this was a feature. Farmers learned it was a death sentence. Emergency rooms started stocking amputation supplies during harvest season. Not for accidents, for 5000s. The live PTO took fingers, hands, and winding arms with mechanical precision. Ford knew about the brake failures by 1967. They didn't recall until 1971. 4 years, 156 deaths. They called it acceptable performance. Internal memos showed engineers wanted better brakes in 1966. Management said no because of cost. The safety tractor killed people to save money. Number 5. International Harvester 1066. The 1066 was International's flagship. Turbocharged engine, enclosed cab, and enough power for any job. Farmers loved working inside instead of fighting weather. The cab was warm in winter, cool in summer, and quiet enough to think. International marketed it as the professional's choice. Comfort meant productivity. Productivity meant profits. The 1066 delivered both in a package that looked like the future of farming. The cab features were impressive. Real heat, actual sound insulation, windows that sealed out dust and rain. After decades of open tractors, the 1066 felt like luxury equipment. Here's the deadly part. The exhaust pipe sits 18 inches from the air intake. Engine running, windows closed, heater on, you're breathing exhaust. The engineers never tested airflow around a moving tractor. The turbocharger makes it worse. When the seals blow, and they always blow after 800 hours, raw diesel exhaust dumps straight into the cab. The heater fan pulls it in faster than it can escape. Carbon monoxide builds up slowly. First comes a headache you blame on long hours, then nausea you think is from diesel smell. Then you pass out while driving 20,000 pounds of machinery. One farm in Nebraska lost father and son the same winter. Both were found unconscious in their 1066. Both tractors were still running. International's fix was a $12 rubber seal and instructions to crack the windows. The instructions assumed farmers would remember to ventilate while working. They didn't. The comfortable cab that sold tractors also killed the people who bought them. Number 4. Allis-Chalmers WD-45. The WD-45 was Allis-Chalmers' answer to Ford's success. More power, better hydraulics, and modern styling. It sold well through the 50s as farmers upgraded from older equipment. Orange paint meant quality. The engine was smooth and everything about the WD-45 looked like progress in tractor design. Independent rear brakes helped with steering. Live hydraulics worked while moving. The WD-45 was everything the Ford 8N was, but better. At least that's what the ads promised. What killed farmers was the brake drums that were too small and made from pressed steel instead of cast iron. Work them hard for an hour, and they heat up and expand. The brakes fade to nothing, but the pedal feels normal. Everything feels normal. The pressure, the travel, even the feedback through the pedal. But when you need them most, the brakes give you nothing. Your foot thinks they're working, but physics makes it clear you're not stopping. The pedal feels right, but metal isn't touching metal where it needs to. Farmers drove them into barns thinking they were braking. Steep hills were death sentences. You'd brake to control speed down a slope. The pedal felt fine. The tractor kept accelerating. By the time you realized the brakes were gone, momentum had control. In 1956, Allis-Chalmers switched over to cast iron drums, but they never issued a recall on the pressed steel models, and they never warned the farmers who already owned them. Instead, they simply made the new ones better and left the rest to figure it out the hard way. Belarus MTZ-80. The MTZ-80 came to America in the 80s when farms were failing and farmers needed cheap equipment. Soviet engineering meant simple, tough, and affordable. Half the price of American tractors with similar power. Dealers marketed them as proven technology. If they worked in Siberia, they'd work anywhere. The D240 engine was nearly bulletproof. The transmission had 18 speeds. For struggling farmers, the price was impossible to ignore. The MTZ-80 looked like value engineering done right. Heavy steel, simple systems, and no unnecessary complexity. This was farming equipment built for work, not comfort. Here's what they didn't tell you. The hydraulic system has no relief valve. Soviet engineers thought it wasn't needed, so pressure builds until something gives. It's never the pump, it's the hoses. And when they blow, 3,000 psi fluid doesn't leak, it cuts. Through clothes, through skin, through anything in the way. At that point, hydraulics aren't a tool, they're a weapon. The electrical system isn't much better. It uses a single wire ground through the frame, but Soviet steel rusts from the inside out. When that ground disappears, 12 volts will find another path back to the battery. Through you, through your tools, through anything that conducts. Farmers got shocked just swapping implements, checking fluids, even by touching the tractor after walking across wet ground. One dealer in Montana made customers sign death waivers before delivery. He sold 47 MTZ-80s and went to 8 funerals. The profit wasn't worth the guilt. Belarus never recalled anything. When the Soviet Union collapsed, all the records disappeared. American lawyers couldn't sue a country that didn't exist anymore. MTZ-80s are still out there, still blowing hoses and still shocking farmers. Parts dealers don't ask about safety upgrades. They just sell replacement hoses and ignore the problem. If that scares you, this next one will make you hate red paint. Number 2. Case 1030 Comfort King. Case called the 1030 the luxury tractor. The Comfort King name promised the best farming experience money could buy. Work in comfort regardless of weather outside. The marketing showed farmers in shirt sleeves working through snowstorms. Climate control meant longer days, higher productivity, better profits. This was modern farming done right. Banks loved financing them. The comfort features meant operators could work more hours with less fatigue. Insurance companies offered lower rates because cabs looked safer than open stations. The Case engine was smooth and powerful. The transmission had 12 speeds for precise control. The hydraulics handled heavy implements without strain. Everything suggested quality engineering and smart design. Here's the nightmare in the cab. It sits on rubber mounts to cut down vibration. Good for comfort, but terrible in a rollover. When the tractor goes over, those mounts compress under the full weight. The frame stays solid, the ROPS keeps its shape, but everything inside is crushed. In a rollover, the cab doesn't just deform, it collapses to about 30% of its original height. And it happens in 3 seconds, long enough to realize what's coming, but nowhere near long enough to get out. The frame twists, jamming the doors, the windows blow under pressure, and then the roof comes down with 18,000 pounds behind it. Air. Conditioning only made things worse. With the windows sealed, carbon monoxide from cracked exhaust manifolds had nowhere to escape. What felt like a comfortable cab could quickly turn into a gas chamber. The sound insulation added another layer of danger. It muted the outside world, other machines, people shouting, even the signs of trouble closing in. The same quiet that made long days bearable also left farmers blind to the threats that could kill them. Dealers kept moving them off the lot because comfort features sold well, and enclosed cabs were what farmers wanted. Case marketed them as protection, all while knowing exactly where the limits were. 447 people died in 1030 Comfort Kings between 1972 and 1984. The lawsuits outlasted the production run. Case's defense was that farmers should have read the fine print. Most operators never saw an owner's manual. They learned from dealers who talked about comfort, not crash physics. But none of these, not the Soviet death trap, not the Comfort King, not even the exploding Magnum, comes close to the deadliest tractor ever built. Number 1. Ford 9N 2N Series. More farmers died on Ford 9N and 2N tractors than every other model combined, worldwide. And here's the sick part. It delivered exactly what Ford promised. The people's tractor, and the people died. Henry Ford wanted to democratize farming like he democratized cars, make tractors cheap enough for everyone. Harry Ferguson's three-point hitch was revolutionary. Ford's mass production made it affordable. They sold 266,000 units between 1939 and 1947. Every small farm wanted one. The price was right. The technology worked. The Ford name meant reliability. The three-point hitch changed everything. Before Ferguson's system, farmers used muscle power and mechanical levers to control implements. Now, one person could do work that took teams before. Here's why it became a mass grave. The Ferguson system created what farmers came to call the death triangle. When an implement struck something solid, the force transferred straight through the three-point hitch, and the tractor flipped backward. The implement went down, the tractor went up. Simple physics with deadly results. Hit a stump with your plow or catch your disc on a rock, and the Ferguson three-point hitch sends that force straight into the rear axle. The 9N weighs 4,000 pounds, and in less than a second, it flips backward. Ford's design made it worse. The tractor sat 18 inches lower than its rivals, with a narrow 38-inch stance and a short wheelbase that put most of the weight behind the rear axle. Stable on flat ground, but the perfect setup for a deadly rollover. The flip happens fast. Front wheels lift, the balance point tips, and then the whole machine comes down on the driver. Stage 2 takes half a second. Not enough time to jump, barely enough time to understand. The tragedy is that it's still happening. The same 9Ns sold at auctions, and estate sales keep killing farmers 70 years later. Ford fixed the design in 1947, but never recalled the old ones. No warnings, no retrofits, just more deaths. The worst part? People still think 9Ns are safe because they're simple and proven. Simple doesn't mean safe, proven doesn't mean protective, and affordable can cost everything. That's exactly what 2,847 farmers thought before their tractors taught them physics the hard way. There's another list we had to make. Modern tractors that look safe but fail before 500 hours. The link's right here, and trust me, you don't want to learn about these the hard way.